Let me make this quick. What if Issei had sacred birth? I almost said sacred gift, sacred birth part one. Alright, basically went down over this. It's almost like Kiba's sword birth. Yeah, Kiba's sword birth. It's basically Kiba's sword birth, but on steroids. Alright, so we pan to a small child, right? We pan to a small kid currently sitting in a corner of a cell with curled up in a ball. The kid is currently letting out silent cries. As well, we hear a faint scream going off in the background. This was the life of Issei Hyodo. Issei, well, ever since he could remember, was, well, he was put in this, program, the Excalibur program, as he called it. It was basically to, it was basically to just see who could actually wield the sword of Excalibur. So far, the test had been, it had been zero successes. But on the sidelines, in secret, they had been practicing on different sacred gears, if they had come across one, such as sword buff, or in the case of Issei's sacred birth. Now, what Issei's sacred gear could do, it appeared kind of as like a ring. Yeah, it appeared like a ring on Issei's index finger. Well, not index, pointer finger. It appeared on Issei's pointer finger in a small golden ring. Now, what this ring could do, it could manifest the user's dreams into weapons, basically. Think of like, if Issei wanted to, he could make like fucking anything. He could literally fucking make anything. This guy could fucking make from knuckle dusters that could shoot laser beams, right? Yeah, but the drawback was that the more the more things the user creates, the more it takes a toll on their mental state. Well, often it could either result in two things. It could result in Issei being mentally exhausted, or it could make Issei just have a mental breakdown. One of the two. Issei will just continue to silently sob in his cell as he heard a cry coming from the deeper parts of, the, how can I say this? Underground laboratory. Yeah, an underground laboratory. He could hear the silent cries of children. Issei merely, shook uncontrollably as he continued to, just cry and cry harder. That was until he, suddenly heard the locks of his cell being unlocked. His head, he looked up and saw, one of the more lethal scientists, to say. This man was particularly known around this laboratory to be a little more harsh on other kids. The man, just looked at Issei as he, as Issei began to, stand up. He wiped a few of his tears away as, the scientist turned around and began a long walk. Issei knew this path all too well, as this was, where the testing ground was. A place to, test different sacred gears out and see which one was stronger. It often resulted in, a massive variety. If one of the kids was able to win, their sacred gear would, they would go under an extensive training. It basically molded them into super soldiers, and they were sold off in different varieties, often being sold off as slaves or as pawns to be used in different peerages. Issei continued to silently follow the scientist as they arrived at the testing grounds. Now, this testing ground was just a dark circular chamber, just think of Orochimaru's like fucking fighting thing. I don't remember. I haven't watched Naruto in a good bit, but yeah, just think of Orochimaru's laboratory. Issei shook his head as he stared at the other combatants around him. Now, instead of like a 1v1 situation, think of it as an all-out battle, a full-on brawl of random kids, I just basically just doing random things. He shook his head as well. He looked at one of the kids. Issei, knew this boy. He had golden hair, he had blonde hair, and blue eyes. This was Kiba Yudo. Issei shook his head as well. He knew Kiba was a strong fighter. After all, they had gone against each other in one of these scenarios. And Kiba would come out on top, but unfortunately would lose to another kid due to his, low amounts of stamina. Issei shook his head as he was decently surprised to see another person there. This person seemed to have pitch black hair and dark red eyes. Issei shook it. Issei continued to shake uncontrollably as well. The scientist turned around and walked out of the testing chamber. Issei got into a measly fighting stance as the golden ring appeared on his finger. Issei knew that the only things he could truly make was merely knuckle dusters and short knives. Issei shook as he made a knife appear in one hand and a knuckle duster on the other one. Issei seemed to sigh as kids seemed to be rushing at each other in a quote unquote glorious test. Well, how long? 7 minutes already, damn. Issei was decently surprised as he saw Kiba rushing at him with a sword in hand. Issei was forced to dodge and deliver a swift punch to Kiba's face with his knuckle dusters. He tried tackling the boy to the ground, but was surprised as when he collided with the boy, all he merely did was almost seemingly bounce off of him. Issei looked up and saw the boy raise his sword over his head and bring it down in a flash. Issei rolled out the way and sweep the boy's legs from under him. Kiba fell to the ground and Issei attempted to stab him in the chest. These expeditions seemed to get a little more bloody. Issei was proudly rewarded as he seemed to jam the knife into Kiba's shoulder. What the? Oh, you know what? Never mind. Issei was very surprised as he pulled the knife out and seemed to direct it towards Kiba's face. Issei was surprised as the boy seemed to quickly noticed this and blocked it with his sword. He rolled out the way. Well, give me a few minutes. Anyway, Kiba was decently surprised as the boy seemed to deflect the sword and swiftly kick him off himself. Issei was surely surprised when he felt a fist collide to his face. Issei was sent a bit back as he looked at the attacker. He saw two red orbs staring at him. The boy seemed to have a menacing look on his face. Issei looked down at Kiba and saw the boy quickly getting up and went to kick the kid. His foot collided with Yuta's side and sent the boy back to the ground. Issei quickly looked up to see his attacker currently rushing back at him in an attempt to land another strike. Issei cocked back his fist and dodged to the side and socked the boy with an uppercut in the process. Issei quickly turned around and tried to stab the back of the boy's neck, but was unfortunately soiled as the boy seemed to fall to the ground quicker than expected and roll out the way. And that's when Issei was surprised as a sharp beam collided with his stomach and sent him back. Issei looked up to saw a magic circle in the boy's hand, glowing a bright red. The boy seemed to smirk as he once again aimed his hand at the boy's face, but was unfortunately surprised as Yuta slashed his back in a wide arc. The boy turning around to shoot Yuta in the face, but was surprised as a knife was unfortunately at his neck. And a few words were spoken, and unfortunately, his throat seemed to just begin to bleed. He fell to the ground, and fighting continued on around him. Kiba and Issei going on in a violent exchange to see who would come out on top, or who would unfortunately die. Well, unfortunately for Issei, once again in old matches, Kiba seemed to efficiently stab the boy in his knee and punched him in the face, sending the boy to the ground. Issei unfortunately couldn't continue and just laid there. He saw Yuta standing over him as he shook his head. He turned around and saw Yuta just running off into a random direction to continue this violent expedition on another student. Issei just laid there for a few solid seconds as his eyes slowly began to close. And that is when all of a sudden this memory is interrupted by a boy shaking his head. The boy seemed to be an older version of Issei. Issei was this is more like a time skip. Just think of it as a time skip since I don't know how to continue that other shit, but anyway. Issei just lay there for a few solid seconds, pondering the memory that had just recently come up. Issei remembered all the violence and blood that had transpired. Issei just sat there, his head currently spinning, but was pleasantly interrupted as he heard the call of his foster mom. Foster mom. Issei slowly got out of bed and, began to get changed for the long day ahead of him at Ko Academy. Damn, I feel like ending it here, but I'm gonna hit the 15-minute mark. Alright. As Issei just got dressed, he heard a few silent curses in his mind. This obviously being one of his sacred gears, it being the all too familiar Western dragon, Drag. Issei sighed and asked what was wrong this time. The conversation that had transpired was, Drag silently cursing at how Issei's mindset was, just dull and had nothing to do in it. This often getting a chuckle out of Issei. The boy merely sighing and asking Drag what's wrong this time. And that's when the dragon went on the long trek of beginning to explain on how dull Issei's mind is, and that there's nothing to do here, kid. You need to get an active imagination or something. Well, one of your sacred gears relies on it, so That's why you can only create knuckle dusters and knives. No active imagination, kid. Issei, just merely sighing and, well, one of his close friends' antics. Yeah, that's 15-minute mark. Goodbye.